Contrary to what I would call conventional auto enthusiast wisdom, I think that the Lexus ES is the quintessential luxury vehicle available in the US. This is comfortable, it's roomy, it rides well, and it's very quiet on the inside. This also used to be the best-selling Lexus. At this point in time, it's simply the best-selling Lexus sedan because of the rise of crossovers, especially the NX and the RX. If you're looking for a new luxury sedan and you think that legroom, cargo room, and fuel efficiency are more important than rear-wheel drive driving dynamics, there's definitely a Lexus ES for you. A lot of folks scoffed that first generation ES was nothing more than a gussied up Camry, and you know what? They were right. It looked like a Lexus on the front, but it definitely was Camry-like on the inside. And that turned out not to be a bad thing, because for the price of an entry-level compact luxury sedan, you could get something that was more mid-sized on the inside with a bigger trunk as well. And that's exactly what's going on with the Lexus ES. This is about the same price as the Lexus IS, BMW 3 Series, etc., but we have a much bigger interior. But back to the Lexus ES. The base model has halogen high beams, which I do think is a little bit weird, but the model that I'm driving today is the F Sport Hybrid, so we get a slightly tweaked grille. This is the angrier looking front end on the Lexus ES, but it still has the hybrid system under the hood. The Lexus ES has long had an unusual place in the Lexus lineup because unlike some brands that just have front-wheel drive cars or some brands that just have rear-wheel drive cars, Lexus has a mix. We have the Lexus IS, which is rear-wheel drive. We had the Lexus GS, which was about the same size as this, but rear-wheel drive. Then we had the Lexus ES, which was, again, IS-sized and front-wheel drive. Then we had the flagship Lexus LS, which returned to rear-wheel drive. And other manufacturers haven't exactly tried this particular product blend. Lincoln, for instance, just had front-wheel drive sedans until recently. You could have considered this the direct competitor to the Lincoln MKZ, but Lincoln and Cadillac have given up on larger sedans with this form factor. With a total length of 195.9 inches, this is 1 inch longer than a BMW 5 Series, but on the inside, we have 4 inches more legroom than that BMW. And that's all because of the front-wheel drive platform. With that engine sitting across the engine bay rather than longitudinally in the vehicle, this has a lot more room available on the inside. It has a shorter hood, longer body, and it still has a pretty big trunk. Around back, we have a subtle trunk lid spoiler, some blacked out chrome accents, full LED tail lamps, and the exhaust tips are tucked up under the bumper. At the moment, Lexus offers 3 different engines under this hood. The ES250 gets a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine borrowed out of a wide variety of different Toyota and Lexus products that produces 203 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. All-wheel drive is standard on that model. That's the big reason you want to get the ES250. It has an 8-speed automatic transmission, and it will get you 28 miles per gallon. Then there's the ES350, the one that most shoppers seem to buy, that produces 302 horsepower out of a 3.5-liter V6 and 267 pound-feet of torque. Fuel economy drops to 25 to 26 miles per gallon, depending on the version that you get. An 8-speed automatic is standard, but you can only get it in front-wheel drive. I was a little bit surprised that Lexus chose not to give the V6 the all-wheel drive system and instead borrowed the engine out of the Avalon. Also borrowed out of the Avalon is this available hybrid system. This is a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder hybrid producing 215 horsepower total, 176 horsepower just from the engine. The rest comes from the electric motors over there on that side, but this gets you 44 miles per gallon. At the moment in the US, that easily makes this the most efficient luxury sedan that doesn't have a plug. So if you're looking for high reliability, high fuel economy, and a really long distance between fill-ups, that's another reason you might want to take a look at the ES. I find the front seats in the ES pretty comfortable, but these seats are not as adjustable as some of the competition, and that's why I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points my front seat comfort score. We have a manual tilt telescopic steering column with a slightly shorter range of motion than some Lexus models, and keep in mind that much like other Lexus vehicles, the front passenger seat does not have the same range of motion as the driver's seat. Jumping into the back seat, you'll really notice the benefit of the front-wheel drive design in the ES. I have an insane amount of legroom back here, about 6 inches with this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and the front seats are pretty thickly padded. Even if I move over to the right side of the vehicle, where this front seat is all the way back in its track, suitable for a 6'5" person that I had in there, I have about an inch of legroom left, and this is all the way back and pretty reclined as well. Another advantage to this platform is that we don't have much of a driveline hump. Even if you get the ES with all-wheel drive, the hump in the middle is going to be an awful lot shorter, closer to the footwells than you'll find in a 5 Series or an E-Class. You'll also notice that although headroom right here in the middle is not exactly generous, I do have to crane my head to one side in order to get it back there towards the headrest, that the rear bench is definitely wider than something like the BMW 3 Series or the Lexus IS. So if you're looking for a luxury vehicle in this price category and you want to put a mixture of adults or child seats in the back, this is going to be a much better option, especially for rear-facing child seats. You'd be hard-pressed to put a rear-facing child seat and a 6-foot-tall adult up front in something like a BMW 3 Series or that smaller Lexus as well, but in here, it's absolutely no problem. Now, it's not all peaches and cream back here. There is just one problem, and that is rear seat headroom. I actually cannot put my head back this headrest back here unless I crane my head to the side either, and that's all due to the roof line. Behind the power trunk lid, we find 13.9 cubic feet of cargo capacity. That definitely puts this above a lot of compact luxury sedans and right in line with a decent number of mid-sized rear-wheel drive options. We do have a spare tire under the load floor, which is a nice touch, but I can't put bags in this position and still have the lid closed. Now, one nice touch with this power trunk lid design is that I can open and close it freely like this manually if I wanted to by grabbing on that handle, or I could hit the button and close the trunk lid that way. The spare tire is certainly one of the reasons that this cargo area is slightly smaller than some of the competition that doesn't have a spare at all, because if you were to remove this temporary spare, you'd gain a few extra cubic feet. It's also worth noting that judging by the size of this cargo divider, which has the tire iron and jack right there, you would be able to fit a full-size spare tire back here in the trunk if you wanted to. Jumping back inside, we find the controls for the moonroof as well as the telematics system just in front of the moonroof there. We have sliding sun visors, which is definitely a nice touch, two-way adjustable headrests, and two-way adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. Lexus has a variety of different interior upholstery options for the ES, but as you'd expect in a luxury vehicle, none of them are cloth. You can either get imitation leather, real leather, and a few different grades of leather as well. The seat bottom and back cushions are perforated because these seats are both heated and ventilated, and as you can see, we have some moderate bolstering on the seat back and seat side cushion. Moving over to the front door panels, we have a reasonable percentage of soft touch plastics, although there are still hard plastics down there at the bottom of the door, as you'd expect in an entry-level vehicle. For the interior design, Lexus borrowed some styling cues from their more expensive vehicles, like the door handle that looks an awful lot like the one that we find in the Lexus LC. We have some trim that runs right across the dashboard. You can get real wood trim, metal trim, etc. A bunch of different trim options there. Soft touch dashboard components stitched in the upper section, but this is not actually a stitched piece of material. It's just an injection molded plastic that's been after stitched. Trim strip right there. There's a pretty decently sized glove compartment below that. It's a slot style, but I was able to fit a larger tablet computer inside. In the middle of the dashboard, we finally have a touchscreen infotainment system back in the Lexus ES. This is an awful lot easier to use than the previous generation system, which only allowed you to use the controller right here in the center console. Now, we still have the Lexus touchpad controller, which is certainly not my preference, and you should know that you will need to use that for some functions, because if I click over here to the Lexus menu, you'll notice that once we're on the nav system, I don't have any way to get back to CarPlay. I do have some options over here on this side. I can click the media option, get some media things on the side there, hybrid system information, stuff like that, but I can't actually get back to the main menu. I have to press the menu button over here to get back to the main menu and pull that up. So they haven't completely reworked the software for the touchscreen just yet. We have a little clock on the side of that, dual zone automatic climate control, engine start stop button there, the controls for the heated and ventilated seats, also the heated steering wheel and rear sunshade. Then we have this storage area right here, which has one cup holder, a little slot right there, and the USB inputs for the infotainment system. Unfortunately, I can't close that lid with the USB ports used because, of course, they're in the way. We have a pretty standard console shifter here, EV mode button, brake hold button, again, that controller right there, a second cup holder here with no lid, but it does have a pull-up divider, so I can choose to have a deep or a shallow cup holder. Behind that, we have a center console here with a well-hidden G wireless charging mat. It definitely fits some of the larger smartphones, but the system does not support wireless CarPlay, so you end up having to have that cable right there. The storage area has a lot of room in it, and to help appease the passengers, you can also open it from the other side. On the driver's side, we find the same full LCD instrument cluster that we've seen in a number of Lexuses for a while. It has a physical ring that slides side to side when you engage the menu. It also changes based on the drive mode that you're in. That drive mode is adjusted via this little knob over here to the right side of that instrument cluster. You can select normal by pressing the button in, you can rotate through eco or sport over there, and then on this side, we have just a button on this side, no knob here. This is for the traction control. Moving out from there, we have one of Lexus's latest 3-spoke steering wheel designs with a thick bottom spoke there, paddle shifters on the back. This is a hybrid, but it does have some imitation gears. We have the controller for that multifunction LCD instrument cluster, some volume up-down buttons, voice command, and then on this side we have the controls for the standard radar adaptive cruise control. You'll notice it's located on the steering wheel, not on a stalk. In my opinion, the hybrid system fits the character of the ES better than the V6 or the naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine. Because driving this vehicle gently, you're never going to hear the engine. This will operate in electric-only mode at lower speeds. It's very, very smooth. Even at higher speeds, unless you're flooring it, you're not going to get too much engine noise, and even if you do, that 4-cylinder engine sound is pretty well muted. 0 to 60 time is definitely acceptable. It's not especially swift. This model went 0 to 60 in 7.4 seconds. It's worth noting that that is considerably faster than Lexus's quoted time for the hybrid model. I'm not entirely clear why that is, but I have checked with a number of my other friends in the industry, and pretty much all of us have recorded 7.4 to 7.5 seconds 0 to 60. Now, this is going to be significantly slower than the slowest version of the BMW 3 Series in the US or the slowest version of the Lexus IS. But this is going to be a very different kind of vehicle. This is softer, quieter, more comfortable. Entire driving experience is simply more serene. But that nature doesn't mean that the ES is a slouch out on the road. This is relatively fun to drive. 60 miles an hour back to zero happened in 124 feet, which is certainly a respectable stopping distance. And Lexus does make a good front-wheel drive vehicle. Lots of caveats, of course, have to apply here. This is not going to handle like a 3 Series or a 5 Series or a Mercedes-Benz E-Class or anything along those lines. But this is not going to be that far off where we see a lot of Volvo's product line, or even, depending on the version you're taking a look at, some Audis available in North America either, because of the weight balance that we find in those Audi products. This has most of the weight on the front axle, pretty much the same that we see in Volvo and Audi's product line. I should take a moment and talk about this hybrid system because there is a little bit of confusion out there. A lot of folks incorrectly assume that Lexus hybrids have a CVT under the hood. That is not true. This doesn't really have a transmission in the traditional sense under the hood. It has a planetary gear set and 2 electric motors. Those can sort of behave like a CVT in that the engine speed does not need to have a fixed ratio to the drive wheels. When you floor the vehicle, you'll hear the engine rev up and it will hang out there at a high RPM as the vehicle accelerates. That's why some people say it sounds kind of like a CVT. But what's going on is quite different than in a belt and pulley CVT like you find in the Lexus UX, the base UX. And this design is why when you hit the accelerator pedal, you do get instant acceleration. It's not exactly linked with the engine RPMs because the electric motors are helping you out. The design of this system is also why when you engage the paddle shifters, you get crisper shifts and more immediate shifts, or I guess imitation shifts, than you'd get in a vehicle with a traditional CVT. Again, no belts, no pulleys in this system, so when you pull on the paddles, what's going on is that the drivetrain controller is using the electric motors to change the effective ratio between the engines and the wheels, and that can happen much faster than a belt and pulley can move. Depending on exactly what you're looking for in a luxury vehicle, the smoothness of this hybrid system could really be an asset. A smooth, quiet ride has long been a hallmark of the Lexus ES, and that is certainly true for this generation as well, even in the F Sport trim which I'm driving today. The suspension tune in this vehicle is a little bit firmer than the base versions of the ES or the regular ES hybrid. So if you're looking for something that has 44 mpg and a slightly sportier tune than the regular Lexus ES, you might want to take a look at the ES300h F Sport. Back out on the paved road at 50 miles an hour, I measured 70.5 decibels in here, making this fairly quiet for the segment. One thing to know is that if you're on a rough road surface, then the cabin seems to be a little bit louder than some of the competition. And that seems to be the way that Lexus has achieved this cabin quietness score. Rather than putting just a ton of sound insulation in the vehicle, they really worked hard to engineer the tires, the wheels, everything about the vehicle to transmit less sound to begin with. And that means that if you're out on a rougher road surface, there's a little bit less insulation in the wheel wells, so things can get a little bit louder in the cabin. But it does mean that out on the open highway, this is going to be quieter than the 3 Series, the C-Class, etc. Over a week of mixed driving, I've been averaging 42.5 mpg. On my usual drive loop, I averaged 45 mpg. So this will definitely be over 40 miles per gallon for the vast majority of shoppers. If you live in a really hilly area, or you do a lot of stop and go driving, or you're driving this harder, obviously fuel economy will drop. But if you're driving this gently, even out on the open highway at say 70 or 75 miles per hour, fuel economy is going to be absolutely excellent. There really isn't much out there that can compete with this in terms of fuel economy other than other Toyota and Lexus products. Bottom line, the Lexus ES is incredibly easy to live with, and whether this is the right vehicle for you will really depend on how you think about luxury. Does luxury mean performance? Does luxury mean handling? Or does luxury mean a quiet ride, a comfortable seat to sit in, high fuel economy, not stopping very often for gas, high reliability, etc.? If those are the things that matter to you more than performance and handling, then you should get a Lexus ES. If, on the other hand, performance and handling are more important, Lexus would love to sell you the new IS 500. For 2022, the ES starts at $40,800. For that price, you get the choice of either an ES 350 front-wheel drive with the V6 or an ES 250 all-wheel drive. If you want the hybrid, that's $41,900, and the F Sport hybrid, which is what I was driving, starts at $45,450. The ES is still an unusual vehicle in the United States, even more so that there is now no longer any direct competition. We don't have the front-wheel drive larger Acura, the RLX. We don't have anything from Cadillac or Lincoln or Buick. The Cadenza's gone, the Azera's gone, and Acura's current flagship, which is still front-wheel drive, is the TLX, and it's considerably smaller. On the inside, it's a little bit more Corolla-sized, even though on the outside, it's about the same size as the Lexus ES, so it's really not the same thing. The target for the TLX was to compete with the Lexus IS, not oddly enough, the Lexus ES. Competitors have come and gone, but the Lexus ES has remained one of the best-selling luxury vehicles in the United States for, I think, a number of logical reasons. If you're not interested in rear-wheel drive driving dynamics, but you're interested in high reliability, a quiet cabin, isolation, lots of room, and a good luxury value, then that is exactly where the Lexus ES comes in. So I'm not going to go through my usual pricing and comparison section here, because what is there to compare the Lexus ES against? If you wanted to compare something against a BMW 3 Series or a Genesis G70, that's where the Lexus IS comes in. And it makes sense in a way that Lexus has now discontinued the Lexus GS because they were fielding two mid-size sedans in the US, a rear-wheel drive model, that was the GS, and a front-wheel drive model, that's the ES. And it seems that the average shopper just preferred the overall practicality that we find in the ES. The front-wheel drive platform means that the interior is much roomier than the Lexus GS. So we find Lexus LS-like room, a little bit less than the long wheelbase model, mind you, but pretty close for a vehicle that is smaller and easier to park on the outside. And if you get the hybrid version of the ES, the hybrid system I think really fits the character of the ES very well, then you'll be getting near 40 mpg. In the end, which vehicle is right for you will really depend on what luxury car means to you. Does it mean rear-wheel drive dynamics? Does it mean being able to do donuts? Does it mean track suitable? Does it mean a short stopping distance? Or does it mean a comfortable front seat, an isolated cabin, high reliability where you never have to visit the dealer except for regularly scheduled maintenance, and long-term high reliability as well? It's most likely that the hybrid version of the Lexus ES is going to be quite simply one of the most reliable luxury cars out on the road. The hybrid system itself is very reliable, and as we've seen from Toyota and Lexus vehicles before, just the general design of the hybrid system from an engineering standpoint means that it definitely is not prone to breaking down. That, combined with the high fuel economy that we see in the hybrid model, also means that it's one of the least expensive luxury cars to keep around. Let me know about that down there in the comment section below, and what would you pick if you were shopping in this segment and looking to spend, say, $45,000 to $50,000, really the sweet spot for the Lexus ES. Would you be interested in something like this, or would you go for something like a Genesis G80? It's absolutely not the same sort of thing, but you could get into it with about 300 horsepower for right around $47,700. So definitely in that $45,000 to $50,000 price range. Be sure and let me know what you would do down there in the comments section. Find me over at facebook.com, Instagram, TikTok, all those other social places, and of course, check out the merch store at awaymerch.com. I'll see all of you later.